Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our monthly career workshop. My name is Chris Stevens. I'm a career coach with a nonprofit organization called Career Catchers here in Montgomery County, and we are partnered with the Montgomery County Ignite Hub to bring you this workshop today. I'm joined here by my colleague Anthony, who is representing Ignite Hub. Once again, thank you all so much for joining. We're going to have a good presentation today. We do want this to be interactive, so if you do have any questions or comments, anything you'd like to share, please feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat. You can also unmute yourself and speak up, or use the raise hand reaction as well, and we will address any questions and comments as we go throughout the presentation. You will be getting this session is being recorded, so you will be getting a copy of this presentation, a recording, as well as the PowerPoint that we're using today. So not to worry, all the links and everything that I'll be sharing, you will have access to after this. So we'll go ahead and get started. Today's topic is around career exploration. Now, and so we'll be talking about sort of what career exploration is, and how to go about it, right? So talking about identifying your interests, how to sort of make an effective career plan, how to conduct research to make the most out of your career exploration, and finally, some tips for using AI in this process as well, since that is a growing trend. Now, why are we talking about career exploration at all, right? A lot of times when we think about career exploration, we sort of think about it for maybe folks who are just looking for their first job, right? Starting out in the workforce for the first time. Maybe it's something that you do once, and then and then you're good, right? You find a job and that's it. Well, that's not true. This is sort of the key takeaway from the presentation here, that if you don't take away anything else, I want you to remember this, is that career exploration is for everyone. One of the trends that we're seeing and have been seeing for many years now, there's a rise in career mobility and job switching, right? People are not staying in their first job forever. There's a lot more job hopping and moving around every few years for better opportunities or because of layoffs, any number of reasons. And so with this increased career mobility, career exploration is not something that you just do once, but it is in fact an ongoing process that takes place over your entire career. You're going to be going through this process sort of multiple times, because your interests, your goals, your plans will change, right? And that's fine. That's how life is. So this is something that you're always going to refer back to, and hopefully it can kind of help you, navigate your career over a lifetime. So it's used by everyone, right? Entry-level job seekers. It can be used by established professionals looking to advance in their field, as well as by individuals who are looking to switch careers entirely. So what is career exploration? Career exploration is the process that people can use to find a career that suits their personality, interests, and skills. This process involves considering various careers, learning more about each, and planning a suitable career path. So the points that I want to highlight here is, obviously when we think about career exploration, we think about interest, right? But it's so much more than that, right? You want to look at things like your personality, your skills, and it's not just figuring out what careers interest you, right? What kind of work you might find interesting. It's going about it in a very sort of coordinated way, right? You make a plan, you do research, and ultimately, find more information on a deeper level. Has anyone, sort of engaged in this process? What's your experience kind of been with career exploration? Have you, sort of done anything that you would consider career exploration? I'm just going to put that out to the group here. Yeah, go ahead, Glorianne.
Yes, here. Yes. I like this topic because I've been wanting to do something different, but then every time I go to, say, a job place or people who will work with you and try to find what you're interested in, it always leads back to what I've already done.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I want to like branch out into what I'm really good at, which is speaking, communicating, teaching, writing, and things like that, and how I can transform them into, a career. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that is part of this whole process, right? Sort of what you're interested is going to what you're interested in is going to change, over time. Um, and it's, it's never sort of a bad time to explore other options or look at new careers. So yeah, absolutely. Sounds like you've kind of started that process a little bit, and hopefully, this will help with that. Thank you for sharing. So the first step in our career exploration process is to identify our interests and our values. Again, a lot of times when we think about career exploration, we really focus on the interests, right? What's something that I would like to do, or what's something that I maybe know a little bit about, right? Maybe I studied it in school or did some training, and what career sort of matches with that. And interests are great. You obviously we want, in an ideal world, you're going to find something that you're passionate about, right? That you enjoy doing. But it goes a little bit deeper than that, and it really is also about figuring out your values as well, right? Um, what are you going to be passionate about? What kind of, not just sort of what career are you interested in, but what kind of work in sort of a broad sense do you want to be doing? What is the sort of the difference that you want to make? Are there certain work environments or sort of types of people or types of work that you really would like to do, or maybe you really wouldn't like to do? Maybe there are certain companies you would like to work for. Maybe there are some that you wouldn't, just based on preference. What's really going to have, a lot of meaning for you and really sort of keep you invested. And that's what we're talking about on sort of the values level, right? Because ideally, in order to be successful in a career, you're gonna have a better time if it's something that does, align with your values, with your core values. So, how do we find all of this out? And you can start by asking some basic questions, right? For to yourself. Things like, what could you do every day and not get bored? Again, in an ideal world, you want something where that'll be kind of interesting to you. Another way to think about it is, if money is no object, what would you do for free, right? What's something that you're really passionate about, that if you weren't constrained by other factors, what would you really enjoy doing? Um, Another one, and you can ask yourself, when you were 10 years old, right, or some young age, what did you want to be? Now, obviously, I think we all had, different fantasies as children, but that does speak to something, right? The same things that you were, potentially interested in as a kid, may translate today. It may not be one for one, but it still informs your values, right? Maybe I wanted to be a firefighter at 10 years old, and now that's not something I'm as interested in, but that inclination to sort of help people, right? Make a difference in my community. That sort of translates, right? So, that can be a question. Um, and while we are sort of talking more about interests and values and so on, it also does, um, it is important to sort of think about, what are you good at, right? What are things that you're good at, like Gloria just mentioned, with the communication and sort of working with people. Um, because chances are that's something you might be successful in. Another part of this is, career exploration is really just the first step. You don't have to come in having all the answers. That's what this whole process is about. So, are there career fields that you would like to learn more about? Maybe you've never worked in the IT field. We are hosted with the Ignite Hub today, so I'll be using a lot of IT examples. But maybe you don't know much about the IT field, but maybe it's something you're interested in learning more about, and that's fine. That's part of this process. There's any number of resources to do that, and we'll get into those. Um, and sort of fundamentally, the big question is, and this kind of goes back to the values part, is, where do you see yourself in the future? Not necessarily just what job you're in, although that's part of it, but where do you see yourself? What do you sort of want to have accomplished, or sort of be on the track to accomplishing? And that kind of goes beyond just a single sort of job, right? Where do essentially, where do you want to be, right? In a perfect world, where do you see yourself? And that's kind of the core question out of all of these. And the place to start is, where do you see yourself? And then you can make a plan to kind of how to get there. Comments or questions on any of this? I see we have a few folks in person, and I mentioned before, we do want this to be interactive. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll address that. Any comments or questions on this? All right. So interests, values, those are all very important, but it is a fact of life that all of us have different obligations and requirements as well, and those can't be ignored. So that's also part of our career exploration process, right? This first step. Things like location, you know, if you're most likely, if you're looking for a job, it's got to be someplace that you can feasibly get to, right? Unless you're prepared to move or it's remote, something like that. But, location is pretty important. Maybe you're willing to spend a lot of time commuting, maybe you're not, but that's a pretty critical question about what's going to be open for you. Things like work schedule, are you interested in full-time, part-time? Um, if a job does, has to offer a specific schedule, can you work that? What sort of shifts can you do? A lot of these are sort of standard questions you'll get on a job application, but it's important to think about this, think about this ahead of time as you're sort of narrowing down what kind of jobs you're looking for. Do you have other things like childcare or school or regular appointments that you have to work around your schedule, right? You want to find something that can accommodate all that. So you want to think about your sort of the time you have in terms of your requirements. Salary, of course, is a big one. We all have different obligations, so ideally you want to find a job that will pay you enough to kind of let you take care of everything and do what you need to do. Salary shouldn't necessarily be the only factor that you're using in your career exploration, but of course it's important. I'm not gonna stand here and tell you that it isn't. Other things to consider, everyone has different, sort of capabilities and things like that. So, some people benefit from having different accommodations in the workplace, to make the job easier for them. That is great. That's, encouraged. If you need some of these accommodations, ask for them. But it is something to think about, right? What kind of jobs can I do sort of with or without the accommodations, and what will allow me to sort of remain healthy and happy as I go about my job, right? Um, Another factor is work environment, and this is pretty all encompassing, right? What kind of work are you interested in doing? Are you okay sitting at a desk at a computer all day? Do you want to be a little more physically active? Do you like working with people? Do you like working by yourself? Um, are you sort of looking for like a management role? All of these are different sorts of things to consider in the work environment. And of course, this isn't an exhaustive list, right? There are many other considerations that could go on here, but these are sort of the practical things that you all need that you need to consider as you're thinking not only about your interests but also sort of what your requirements are. Just have a few comments here. Let's just address some of these real quick. Um, so, okay, I see we have someone saying you've set up appointments with people to talk about what they actually do. Great, we will get to that. That's informational interviewing. And you've also used some AI and things like that. Great, I might ask you to share your experience when we get to that towards the end there. And Anthony's right, those are all great paths for starting this search. So awesome. Comments or questions on sort of the requirements that you need to think about? And again, a lot of this kind of goes without saying, right? You usually have an idea of the salary and location and things when you apply for a job, but it really is important to think about it and figure out sort of what you're going to accept and what may not be as feasible. So part of something that can help sort of focus this, right? Many of us have a lot of different interests or really aren't sure where to start, and that's fine. Fortunately, we have tools for that, and that's where things like career assessments come in. Now, career assessments are tools that help individuals understand their interests, skills, personality, and values to identify suitable career paths that match with those. It's important when you're looking at career assessments, there are no right or wrong answers. Results are always sort of meant to be a starting point in your career exploration. They're not meant to tell you, oh, you're not able to do this. They're not meant to close off any potential pathways. It is really just to sort of give you more ideas and kind of give you a starting point to narrow things down. I think most of us, have probably done something like this in the past, whether in school or, just on our own. And, usually what it is you answer some questions and then the career assessment, gives you a list of jobs. And, you might think, yeah, that's me, or wow, really? That's not me at all. And that's okay, um, even if career assessment gives you some results that you don't like, that is more information for you, right? It's not meant to sort of narrowly direct you into a specific career path. It is just meant as a guide. Um, it's also, it can be helpful to use multiple assessments. All these different assessments operate, a little bit differently. They all measure similar things, but they all operate a little bit differently. So I often recommend using a couple different assessments to really get more detailed information and try to get as much insight as you can. Um, some of these measure interests, some of them measure, specific like skills toward a career path, some of them measure values, and so on. And of course, you'll retake these assessments over the course of your career, right? People change, values change, interests change, skills change. So, who you are even, 6 months or a year ago is, maybe not who you are now, right? So again, these are not one and done. You want to, always be sort of keeping these as tools in the back of your mind and using them whenever you feel like you need a little more insight into yourself, as you're doing your career exploration. Has anyone done any kind of career assessment before? And if so, what did you think about it? Yeah, Glorianne again. Go ahead.
Yeah, me again. Yeah, I've done those career assessments where it breaks down these little things that you have over there to the right,
Hmm. Yeah.
and they really fit, but I just can't find any jobs within those, to make a living with.
Yeah.
But I like
Absolutely.
that you said that there aren't any hard and fast rules, which is something I was tending to do to lock myself in there with that. So I like that you pointed that out.
Yeah, and that is the trick sometimes, right? You can get some of these results that you feel really describe you, and then depending on the assessment, the actual jobs they present, may or may not be helpful, right? You may say, well, this isn't really me, or that's not feasible, and that's okay. Again, it is just sort of a starting off point. Regardless of the results, I do recommend sort of reviewing them pretty carefully because you never know. There might be something that sort of tips you off and you go, oh wow, maybe that is interesting. Maybe I do want to look more into that. So it's just it is just a starting point. The one on the right here is a RIASEC exam. That's the basis for a lot of the popular career assessments, and it sort of organizes you into different 6 different categories here. And again, it is important to sort of realize that this is not sort of who you are, right? This is just based, I mean, it is, but it's just based off interests, just because you score pretty highly as, a helper or an organizer doesn't mean you can't be a creator or a doer, right? It doesn't mean that you're weak in any of these types of things. It's just based off interest. But yeah, that's a pretty popular one. So I've got a whole list of different career assessments here. These are all free. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it is sort of a place to start. A good one is through the ONET Interest Profiler. We'll talk about ONET a little bit later. They've got some other good information. But that one sort of follows this RIASEC structure. And it really is just based on interest. So, do you want to do something or not? Not will I make enough money for doing it? Not do I have enough education to do it? It's just about interest. You also have a little more specific things. The CompTIA website has an IT career pathway quiz. So for folks who are interested in getting into IT, you can take this quiz and kind of see how your interests match to different IT career pathways. That one's a little more specific. You also have a few different assessments through Career One Stop, another great site. Again, they have a skills matcher. So again, sort of you look at your skills and what careers that might match up to, as well as a work and values matcher, right? So not so much the skills, more of the core values and interests. And then you have a few things that are, they're career related, but it's more so on like the personality side, right? And there's a few here, right? Because your personality, these personality assessments also kind of get to the core values, right? And that can help guide you in your career path. So there's a few different ones here that you can use. And again, you will be getting a copy of all of this. So no need to write it down. We'll be sending you a copy of the PowerPoint. I believe all of these are free. Yes, they may ask you to create an account to get the results, but I believe all of them are free. And if they're not, you can find, even if you come across a paid career assessment, there are plenty that are free. So this is just a sample. All right, so we talked about sort of interests and values and how to use career assessments to do that. Let me stop for a minute. Any questions on the career assessments or comments? All make sense to everyone? Great. So step two, we've identified our interests, our core values, maybe a couple career fields that we want to explore. The next step is to make a plan, right? You're not really going to get very far in your career exploration without a plan. It's not really enough to say, well, I'm interested in looking at IT, and that's that, right? What do what do you do next? How do you actually translate that interest into action, right? And that's where effective planning comes in. So the planning helps you determine what steps you need to take towards achieving your goals. It's at this point that you want to set short and long-term goals for yourself. Some of this goes back to, where do you see yourself long-term, right? What are some of these long-term goals and sort of professionally and personally, and what steps do you want to take to get there? But you can also set goals for your career exploration, right? By, in a month, I want to have, done research into X, Y, and Z fields, or, tried out a class or something like that. It can be both short and long term. It's best to be intentional about this, right? You can have all kinds of ideas in your head, but unless you are sort of very intentional, and it often helps to write things out and sort of create a schedule for yourself, it can be kind of hard to implement. So I highly recommend writing out your plan and creating a schedule that you follow. Now, life happens, things change, that's fine. But again, it's a good sort of starting point and a good way to sort of keep yourself accountable if you write things down. And with any plan, you do want to be checking on your progress regularly. Otherwise, why have a plan, right? If you're not sure how far you've gone and what your progress is. So make sure you do that. And it's up to you to sort of figure out how to do that. Maybe you check in daily, right? Maybe you check in with yourself weekly, monthly. As long as it's regular and you have that goal, that's all that matters. The other thing is, none of us are in this alone. Certainly, the job search and sort of career exploration in general can be pretty overwhelming, right? I mean, you're making a lot of decisions about your future potentially, right? And it can be overwhelming. So, another part of this is being able to sort of seek out feedback and support, and that should be part of your career exploration plan, is to get feedback and support. In fact, I would say that by attending this workshop today, you are doing just that. You are getting support, and are part of a community right here, all trying to do the same thing. So feedback can be friends, family, professionals in the field. I know someone mentioned informational interviewing earlier. That's all good. And sort of sharing your plan and your goals with people can help keep you accountable. Someone can check in and say, hey, have you made any steps toward getting that goal? Or hey, what are you thinking about this? There are people you can bounce ideas off of, and fundamentally, you want to try to find people that will support you, because this is all easier said than done, right? It's one thing for me to stand up here and sort of talk you through the process, but actually doing it yourself is a lot of work. So having that support network around you is always going to be pretty valuable here. A quote I like is, a goal without a plan is just a wish. And while wishes are great, we want to make sure that we actually translate that into action and make it a goal, right? And the way to do that is through a plan. Comments or questions on the planning? All right. So when we talk about goal setting, I recommend using SMART goals. Now, this is a system some of you may be familiar with. And basically, the idea is, we talked about a goal without a plan is just a wish. So this is what really takes your wish, your dream, and makes it a goal. It's very easy for me to say, well, I'm looking to switch careers. Right now, I work in retail and I'm trying to switch to a help desk, an IT support role. That's my goal. And that's fine. That's a great starting point, but that's not very specific, right? It doesn't really tell me how I get from point A to point B. All I know is where I am and where I want to get to. That middle part is a little, a little unclear, right? So that's where these SMART goals comes in. So SMART, SMART, it's an acronym. You want to make your goals as specific as possible. Right. So rather than saying I want to switch careers from retail, or my ultimate goal is to become work in IT as a help desk person. I can do better than that. I can make that a little more specific. I want to work at IT in an IT support role for a federal agency, something like that. I can identify the specific career pathway, the work environment, and maybe some other stuff too. As specific as possible is really gonna help you, make that happen. You want your goals to be measurable. You have to be able to quantify your progress and see how close you are to, reaching that goal. Again, if my goal, if all I say is I want to switch from retail to IT, that doesn't give me any progress, right? Now, if I start taking classes, learning about computer hardware and software, taking help desk certifications, right? Like A plus, Network plus, and so on. Those are specific things that I'm doing that are getting me closer to my goal. There are actions that I am taking, tangible actions that I'm taking that are getting me closer to that goal, right? That I can check off. I have a measure of how close I'm getting there. Here's where I am now. Here are the skills I need. Here's where I will be in the future, right? So, I'm checking off a list of what I need to do to get from point A to point B. I have a way to sort of measure my progress. And it doesn't have to be sort of just all about skill building, right? I'm trying to switch careers. So maybe my goal is to submit 10 job applications a week, right? That's something I can measure. Those are steps I'm taking to achieve my goal. Maybe I want to set up one informational interview every couple weeks or every month. I can do that and mark that off my list of progress toward my goal, right? It's measurable. I have specific actions I'm completing towards that goal. You want goals that you can realistically achieve. Now, I'm not telling you to sort of sell yourself short or anything like that. I want you to dream big, right? The bigger the better. But you do want to make sure that it's realistic and that you have a good idea going in of what the goal will take to achieve, right? So, if my goal is to become president of the United States, let's just say, is that something that's attainable? Sure, maybe. It would take quite a lot of work to get there from where I am now. A lot of things would sort of have to go right and fall into place. Uh, and but from where I am right now, that's not something I can probably realistically achieve. And if I want to, I really need to, start working now and really, have a good idea of what that will take. So when we're talking about attainable, we're not saying, oh, the goal I have is too high, it's too hard to achieve. I'm just going to set my sights a bit lower. That's not what this is about. It's more about sort of understanding exactly what your goal, what you will need to do to achieve the goal. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, great. So that's what we mean by having attainable goals. The goals should also be relevant, right? You have your short term and your long term goals. This place that you're trying to get to. So any actions that you take should be in service of getting to that long term goal, right? If the actions you're taking aren't sort of relevant to you, it's easy to get sort of sidetracked, right? And spend time and energy not really working toward that long term goal. So if I'm going from retail to IT, and I decide to take a cooking class along the way, is that relevant to my IT goal? Probably not. Now, that's not to say I shouldn't do it. Maybe it's relevant in other ways, but to me, but you get the point, right? When you have your long-term goal, your actions should be you should be asking yourself along the way, is what I'm doing now relevant towards where I want to be? or am I getting, distracted by, by other things? And the last thing here with T is time-based. You want to give yourself a deadline. It is very easy to say, I'm going to be an IT support person, going to work for a federal agency, and leave it at that, right? That's at some point I will get around to doing that process, getting the skills and applying for those jobs and getting there. But if I don't have a deadline, it's very easy to sort of push everything off until the next day, right? It's very easy to kind of procrastinate and essentially lose time if you don't give yourself a deadline to accomplish your goals by. Now, a lot of this isn't necessarily hard and fast, right? Long-term goals, maybe a few years out, right? But certainly for your short-term goals, you should have clear deadlines that you are trying to meet. You may not make the deadlines, you may have to change the deadlines, and that's fine. Again, life happens, plans change, deadlines can shift, but it's more so important that you have a deadline, whatever that is, and that you are working toward it. It's another way of just keeping yourself accountable and again, giving yourself a time frame to achieve things in so you're not just saying, well, I'll get to it at some point. Does that make sense? Any sort of comments or questions on SMART goals? All right. So we've talked about sort of finding interests, some tools for that. We've talked about sort of planning and goal setting. The next step in our career exploration process is conducting research. And now this is important, right? Part of exploration is actually exploring and gathering information. You need to, there's a lot of things that you want to find out about a career field that you're looking to move into or advance in. Information you need, like, what is the career pathway? If I want that IT help desk job, what are my opportunities for promotion and advancement? I start out as an entry-level help desk person. Where am I in 5 or 10 years? What's the role I'm filling there, right? I go from maybe help desk to network administrator. Maybe I do cybersecurity. Maybe I do, database developer. There's a lot of different career pathways that I could pursue, and I need to know sort of what those are. It's not just the job that you're looking at now. It's what are the next few jobs that you might be looking at if all goes well, right? If you start with this one, what's that career pathway? We did talk about salary, and it is a consideration, right? A pretty important one. You want to know what the earning potential of any given career field is. And there are ways to do that. We'll get in there, but again, it's we all have obligations, we all have requirements. Is this job going to essentially pay me what I need? And if not, will I get there at some point, or maybe I need to think about another job? These are all considerations, right? Salary information is pretty important. You also want to get an idea of if your sort of chosen field is growing, shrinking, or static, right? A growing career field, right? That's one that's going to have a lot of openings. There's a lot of demand for it. Think things like IT or healthcare. Those are everyone always kind of needs those services, right? If it's always good to try to find something in a growing career field. But if the career field that you're interested in is shrinking, right? Maybe not as many openings and it may be a little more competitive, a little harder, that's okay. I'm not saying, well, if your career field is shrinking that you shouldn't go for it. But again, it's more about realizing what you'll need to do. How can you make yourself more competitive in that smaller market, right? Or you may be in a career field that's sort of the same, right? It kind of stays the same. It's not really changing. And that's fine too. But these are all things you want to sort of know about and understand so you know what you're getting into. You want to get a sense of what skills and knowledge are required, right? I'm going from retail to IT. There are certainly some transferable skills in there, but I'm going to need some of those technical skills too. So what kinds of things do I need to know to be successful in this field? And what does it look like to sort of acquire that knowledge? Is it something that I can learn myself? Is it something I can learn on the job? Do I need to take certifications or education? That kind of thing. So again, these are all sort of the questions, right? What are the typical what is the typical sort of skill or knowledge level of people who are in this field? You know, is it college level? Is it a certification? So on, things like that. You also want to get a sense of what activities are you expected to perform. You know, maybe I'm interested in IT, but you know, sitting at a desk for 8 hours is hard. You know, and if that's my entire workday, well, I may have an interest in IT, but you know, doing help desk stuff might be difficult for me. You know, I may want to look towards something more like a field technician, right? The hardware technician that goes out and fixes things, right? That's a little more hands-on. So get a sense of sort of the type of work activities that you'll be expected to do, and you know, is that something that you feel you're okay with, and would feel comfortable doing, you know, on a long-term basis. Another important part of research is where the career opportunity is located. Now, things like IT and healthcare, you know, you kind of have those um, opportunities for things like that everywhere. But other career fields, you know, some places may have more than others. You know, we think about Silicon Valley and things like that, as sort of the, you know, the tech hub. And again, I know I'm using a lot of IT examples, but this really is relevant for any career field. You want to know where, you know, where your career opportunities are located, and you know, if they're not close to where you are right now, you know, is it something that can be done remotely, or maybe you have to think about relocating. Again, this is not an exhaustive list of information that you need, but it is sort of a starting point. Anything else that I'm going to put this question to everybody? Anything else that's not on this list that you think might be important as part of you know, part of your career research? What are some other factors that you might want to think about? Any ideas? Cool. Okay. All right. Well, we'll talk a little more about that. So the good news is, again, this sort of whole process of research can be, you know, kind of overwhelming. But fortunately, again, there are plenty of tools for it. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's a good point. In the chat, we have, you know, finding mentors that look like you. Yeah, that sort of goes back to work environment, right? Who is in this field? Are you going to be sort of comfortable interacting with these people? Are you going to feel supported? All of that is very important, right? And that sort of gets beyond just the raw numbers of earning potential or location or, you know, sort of a career pathway. Yeah, you want to examine that sort of work environment as well. Absolutely. Sort of the non-tangible stuff, we'll call it. Yep. Yep, absolutely. So a lot of good resources here to do this type of research. This is an example right here. My Next Move and ONET. I referenced them before with the interest profiler. And we'll, in fact, here I'll show that off right now. So let me swap my screen share here. So this is ONET Online, and I'll just run through this real quick. This is a great place to start. Certainly not the only resource, but a good one. Now, some of you may be familiar with this. This is run by the U.S. Department of Labor, and it really is a wealth of all types of career information. I've been using a lot of IT examples, and I can certainly do so here. But I'm just gonna, let's get everyone involved here. Someone give me a career field or a job title that we can look up here as an example.
Project manager.
Project manager. Okay. Yeah, let's start with that one. Project manager. Okay. So we'll just do project manager. And you can see here that it sort of breaks it down into a few different things. You know, you have information technology project manager, there's project management specialists, there's, you know, architectural or construction managers. So it kind of breaks it down a little bit. So, you know, it may not be a one-for-one result with your search term. So sort of do the best you can and figure out what looks close enough. We'll start here with IT project managers. That's the first one. And again, so looking at here, first thing we see is it has a bright outlook. And actually, you'll see this little sun next to several of these. And bright outlook means the career field is expanding, right? It is a growth industry. There are projected to be a lot of openings in that field. So that's a good start. Now Now, information technology project manager is great, but that's a pretty, that's a pretty broad title. So so there's different job titles that you might see within that, right? That would be similar work to what you're looking for. So maybe I'm not seeing a lot of results for information technology project managers, but I might see a result for a cloud product director, a cybersecurity project manager, data center, manager, and so on. So it gives you some other sample job titles to look at as well. So if you're not finding your results just based off your initial search, you can try these other additional job titles as well. We talked about, in the research, what your sort of work looks like, what your typical, day might be, your job responsibilities. And that's, they have a list right here. So here's a whole list of different tasks that you might be asked to complete if you were in this role. Again, it does vary from company to company, but this is a pretty good overview of, of what you're going to be looking at doing. Maybe you do some of these things already in your work, and that can help you, as you're looking for a different role. Or maybe this is completely different, but there are some things that are similar enough that you're doing that you can relate here. Either way, this is a good way to kind of see exactly what types of work you might be doing. We mentioned skills, what kind of skills are required. And as you can see here, there's a whole laundry list of different skills. Now, not every IT project manager job is going to use all of these. I don't think it's possible for anyone to know all of this. But again, you can kind of see the common ones, right? Anyone with the hot technology icon here is something that may be worth being familiar with. So you can get a sense of what types of technology you're going to need, right? We see a lot of like cloud-based management software, customer relationship management software, enterprise software, different kinds of things. Now, not all of these are going to be relevant to everyone, so it is important to kind of figure out which ones are. But if you're looking for a role that requires this enterprise software, here are some systems that might be worth trying to explore. So, it does, this ONET does a very good job of sort of laying out some of these technology skills as well. We also have a little more detail on some of the work activities, again, sort of the standard things that you're looking at. And rather than the tasks, which are sort of more technical, this is a little more on the sort of the people side, right? Coordinating the work of others, collecting information, scheduling, resolving conflicts, that kind of thing. It goes a little beyond just sort of the technical responsibilities and more with sort of the people, right? Do you feel comfortable, developing teams or, motivating subordinates, things like that. Work context, do you have to use email? Do you have to be on the phone a lot? Do you have to, work in a team, in a team environment? So, if you like people, if you're good at communications, this might be something for you. If not, maybe there's another role or something you can do to kind of, to make yourself a little more comfortable with this. We talked about the sort of skill and knowledge level, and that's what they have here. We can see that most of these occupations require at least a 4-year degree. They often sort of experience is required, right? Or some specialized certifications. For project management, the PMP is kind of the big one, the project management professional. And you can even see a selection of sort of what types of training and credentialing programs are available in your area. Again, not an exhaustive list, but it does draw from the Department of Labor, so it tends to be pretty good. Again, a little more on skills and things like that, and a breakdown of what people who are in this field have education wise. A lot of this is sort of, and actually with the interests here, if you take that ONET interest profiler, you can see that people that score highly in the enterprise and conventional investigative might be a good fit for this career role. So it ties back into that career assessment that's also on here. Now, they do have salary information, and a lot of times during interviews and things like that, you get the question of, what is your required salary? And that can be, a hard question to answer. So I often, when someone asks me about that, I often use ONET to give them an idea. So we can see that nationwide, the sort of average wage is about $52 an hour. But we can go a little more specific, right? We can look at Maryland here specifically. We can see that in Maryland, the, sort of the average salary for IT project managers is a bit higher than than sort of the nationwide average. This area has a little more, need for that, right? We can even go by zip code. We'll just put Rockville in here, and it actually sort of gives us a DC area estimate as well, right? Washington, Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland, that kind of thing. So you can get pretty, you can get pretty detailed here. And it gives you a nice range of what the salary is. So maybe you start out somewhere around here and can work your way up here. And again, it does break it down. So that's just an example, but something like ONET is kind of a one-stop for a lot of the information that you're looking for here, and it's certainly not the only one. That's just an example of how you can use a platform like this to look. I also do want to point out that ONET interest profiler I mentioned before is also on that site theoretically. I don't know why it's not working now, but you can also go on here and access that at least one career assessment in one convenient place. Questions on ONET and some of these details? I would also like to, someone mentioned social work in the chat here, so we'll go ahead and just kind of go through the same thing for that too. We'll use a couple examples here. Oops. Yeah. And again, you can see here it kind of breaks it down a little more. So, social work, teaching, healthcare related social workers, mental health social workers, child social workers, different things like that. We'll just do healthcare social workers. And again, same kind of information. Here's the type of work you're likely to be doing on a regular basis. Different kinds of software. We see that this, the sort of software that's typically utilized isn't necessarily as broad as in IT. That's fine. It still gives you a pretty good idea, right? Again, the different sort of people skills that go into this. And we can see here that, for a lot of these jobs, it's, they require at least a master's degree and usually some kind of, certification, right? A licensed clinical social worker or master social worker, that kind of thing. And again, this is just typical, right? There may be some jobs that don't require all of this, but if you're looking to get into social work, just know that this might be, this is kind of what you're looking at as far as preparation. We can do salary as well. Just do this breakdown again, and again, we can see much like IT, the social work sort of average is a little bit higher for sort of our area here compared to the sort of nationwide area, and it does break it down sort of by location. So yeah, another good example there. Questions on any of this on ONET? Great. So let me get back to my presentation here. Another source of research, and this is going to be sort of IT specific, is going on to some of the different sort of professional organizations, right? So in this case, I'm going to use CompTIA again, which is an IT certifying organization. And for anyone who's interested in IT, they have a pretty good breakdown of a few different IT pathways, right? Saying you want to go into IT is great, but there's so much you can do within that field that you want to narrow it down, right? Make that goal as specific as possible. So maybe you're interested in being an IT support specialist or a networking specialist or cybersecurity or data analyst. Something like CompTIA can show you a lot of the same different types of information. So I just grabbed a screenshot of the support specialist. Again, it sort of talks about what some of the typical responsibilities are, what some of the different job titles are that you might see as you're looking up different careers, and what skills you need to do, right? What skills you need to have. You need to be able to work with customers. You need to be able to problem solve and so on. It also adds a breakdown here of some of the salary, right? Sort of beginner, entry level, intermediate or mid career, and then advanced career, right? And it gives you an average salary. Now, again, it depends on the company, right? Some are going to be more, some are going to be less, but this is sort of an average of what you might expect. It also shows a number of job postings. And again, they update that. This is from, I think, a little while ago, but they give you sort of an estimate of, I think nationwide, the number of beginner of entry level roles, intermediate, advanced, and so on, as well as a number of certificates that are available for each stage of your career path. So something like this is also a great resource for that, and it gets a little more into in this case, specific IT, right? ONET didn't necessarily give us the specific certifications. Something like CompTIA will do that for us. Plenty of other resources as well. Most of you are probably familiar with job sites like Indeed and Glassdoor. Not only do they show you sort of what companies are hiring, and you can actually find job descriptions, things like that on there, but they also have employer reviews. So if you're interested in a certain company, but aren't really sure what it's like to work there, what's that work environment, what's the culture like, you can actually go into Indeed and Glassdoor and find reviews from employees of these companies and see what they say. Maybe it's a good work environment, maybe it's not. Maybe it's pretty fast paced or high pressure. Maybe the workers feel respected, maybe they don't. All different kinds of things. Now, it is important to take any sort of review, that you see online with a grain of salt. Most people don't leave reviews, and most people who do leave reviews, it may be sort of negative, but it's just a tool to give you a little more information, right? As long as you sort of don't focus specifically on that and sort of use it more in addition to the rest of your research, it's a good, these are good tools. Company websites themselves are great. You're always told before going into an interview or applying to research the company, and absolutely that can be part of your career exploration. Maybe you're interested in working at Amazon, so go on their website. What do they say about themselves? What do they, a lot of companies will talk about their culture or their priorities or their values. If their values match up with your values, great. That's a good start. So just company websites themselves are a great source of information. Maryland Department of Labor has their own, well, they have a couple websites, but one of them is Maryland Workforce Exchange. A lot of good stuff there. They have job postings, but they also do have a lot of the labor market information similar to ONET. It's also a way to find different workshops and trainings in Maryland as well. So I recommend checking that out. US and Maryland Department of Labor in general. Things like LinkedIn are also, a good way to do research. Again, you can connect with people who are, working in a certain field and get their perspective, get their, information from them. I find, generally speaking, people are pretty eager to talk about themselves. So, trying to connect with people over LinkedIn and do some of that networking for research purposes is a good strategy. Now, taking some of this offline, and we've had a few people mentioning this, informational interviews, right? When we think about job interviewing and jobs, we often think about a job interview, right? Where you're essentially trying out for a job and seeing if you're a good fit. That's not what informational interviews are. Informational interviews are just that. You're collecting information. You're talking with someone without necessarily having the expectation of getting a job or sort of trying to prove yourself and show off your skills, right? It's more about getting information. It's a little more informal, a little more relaxed, and more sort of driven by you versus an interviewer. And informational interviews you can pretty much do them with anyone. Maybe it's someone in an industry, who works at a company that you're interested in. Maybe it's a friend of a friend who happens to work in the field that you're interested in, right? But again, it's a lot sort of lower stress and more about just getting that information. And again, I do find that in general, people are willing to talk, with you and give information. So I highly recommend informational interviews. Has anyone, I know a few people in the chat have mentioned that, but has anyone sort of done informational interviews, and what's your experience been with that?
It's not always easy to find people willing to do them,
Yeah.
because they may think you're coming for their job, but so it's easier with people who you're familiar with, or if you can get someone to introduce you to someone.
Yep.
I've also asked some people at Montgomery College that if they've, taught someone in that area or whatever, if they have an instructor in that
Mhm.
area, that they make a referral. Um, but you have to go with some questions. I mean, some thoughtful questions, because it's kind of hard to say, hey, so what do you do? Especially if it's someone who's not used to being a mentor.
Yes.
Um, so a lot of times with different organizations you're associated with or affiliated with, it's easier to find people that way. And also look through your friends. It was amazing to me to find out what my friends do. I mean, you're friends with people all the time and don't realize. Like, I found out one of my friends wrote for Lost.
Oh,
Like, I had
wow.
no idea he wrote the first two seasons of Lost. Um,
Wow. Okay.
so, I don't want to go into that field, but when I found people that are interested in writing for television, I'm like, hey, talk to Javi lately? you know so quiz your friends, let them know that you're interested in talking to someone that works in that field, and you'd be surprised what presents itself. But you definitely have to have some, at least 5 questions. You can do it over lunch, like, hey, I'd like to take you to lunch, and just talk to you. That way you get some good food, and maybe if it doesn't go well, at least you have a good conversation about something else and some food.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, thank you so much for sharing. You basically hit all of the, the major points there. Yeah. So the first thing is, ask around, right? Reach out to your friends and family, because you literally do not know who knows who, right? You may think you have a pretty good idea of what your friends do, but you don't know what their friends do, right? There could be a connection there. And like you said, it is always going to be easier to sort of have that initial contact if there's some sort of connection, right? If you can get introduced or referred to someone. You can try sort of cold calling or cold reaching out to someone, but generally it is more effective if there is that sort of connection established. To begin with, that's true of any kind of networking. You mentioned that professors or instructors can be a good source of information. Yep, absolutely. They usually have some relevant experience. And yeah, as far as, sort of making people comfortable with this, be very clear up front, right? This is an informational interview. I'm not, you don't even have to bring up that you're looking for a job in their company or anything like that. Really just make sure you're clear and upfront that, hey, I'm just looking for information. I'm interested in the work you do, and I'd like to learn more about it, right? Can I take you out for coffee? Just sort of be upfront with the expectations, and during the session, don't say, "Hey, can you refer me for a job?" or anything like that, right? Um, just set those expectations ahead of time, and that can usually help. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better. Thanks so much for sharing. Another good source is volunteering. If you're not currently working right now, I always recommend or doing some kind of training. I always recommend volunteering. And essentially because it's a form of networking, right? You never know who you're going to be working with, right? It's a way to sort of show off your skills and abilities. Even if you're volunteering and it's not you're not volunteering in your chosen field, that's okay. Again, you never know who you're volunteering with, right? Someone else who's volunteering right alongside you could be someone that you want to get to know, right? Maybe they do work in that field. It also gives you a way to get references and to, again, sort of showcase some experience that may transfer into your chosen career field. If you can volunteer with with your in your chosen field or with a favorite organization, great. That just makes it easier when you ultimately try to look for opportunities in that field. I know some people in chat also mentioned job shadowing. That is certainly an option if you can arrange that. Job shadowing is where you, kind of like informational interviewing, you're able to actually go on site in a workplace and essentially shadow someone, follow them around for a day or a week or what have you, some period of time, and really kind of get to see what they do and learn about their role and the organization in more of sort of a hands-on type of way. So that's a great resource if you can arrange that. Again, it helps to have that referral or that introduction rather than just calling someone up that you don't know and saying, "Hey, can I follow you around for a day?" Things like internships and apprenticeships would also, fall kind of in this category as a way to gain experience and gain research. So Again, not an exhaustive list, but these are some good places to start. Any other comments or questions around the research piece of this? All right, moving on. So we're going to talk about how to use AI for career exploration. I think someone in the chat had mentioned they do that already, and there's a number of ways that you can use it. Right, AI is kind of the trend now, and it is a tool, right, that you can use. So focusing specifically on the career exploration part of the job search, you can do it. You can use it to analyze industry trends, right? A sample prompt might be, what are the trends for the IT industry in Maryland? Or more specifically, what are the trends for cybersecurity, roles in Maryland? Again, the more specific, the better. And I always like it to ask it to cite its sources, right? AI isn't perfect. We'll get into that in a little bit, but you want to make sure you have sort of real data to back it up. But it can provide sort of a summary of some of these career trends and industry trends. So you can use it for sort of research in that sense. You can use it to analyze your skills and any potential gaps, right? You can take your resume or just a list of your current skills and say, hey, how do these match to a career in XYZ, right? I'm using IT as an example, but it could be for any career. Or what skills are required for a career in this field, and how do mine match up, right? What are the gaps? You can ask it sort of specifically to sort of give you an analysis of that. You can also ask it for like, and I'm using interview preparation here, but not just job interviews, but also for informational interviews, right? What are some, if you're doing it using it to prepare for a job interview, you can say, hey, what are some typical questions for this type of role, and how can I structure my my answers, right? If you're doing it more from the informational interviewing side, you can say, I'm interested in, I'm going to go for an informational interview with this cybersecurity specialist who works for Amazon. What are some good questions that I can ask that will, allow me to learn more about the industry or the role, things like that. You obviously can use it to review a resume or a cover letter or an elevator pitch. That's getting a little more further on in the process, but again, with the sort of tying it to the skills, right? How do I how do I tailor my skills for this role that I'm looking at? How do I what skills and experiences that I have do I want to highlight in order to make myself look good for this other role? Same with the elevator pitch. I'm going to a networking event and I want to describe myself and my experience in 30 seconds. Give me some ideas about how to do that, right? So it's a pretty varied. You can use it for a lot of different things. And we mentioned some of those career assessments before. I have another one for you. This one I think is actually sort of marketed as being AI powered. So there are some AI sort of powered career assessments as well that you can find. Has anyone, I know someone mentioned it towards the beginning of the session, but has anyone sort of used AI in their career exploration or sort of more generally in their job search process? And what's your experience been with that, if so?
I used it more for cover letters.
Yep.
And also follow-up letters. I always send a handwritten thank you letter. I mean, people may not think that that does anything, but it does. Or even if it's by email, if you don't want to send something in writing. But I did use it for some interview prep, talking about the different interview styles and how to prepare for different ones. Like sometimes there's a panel, sometimes it's a behavioral or
Yep.
those kind of things. I've used it to find, like I said, the gaps
Yep.
in learning and in an experience. And it just depends on which if you're using ChatGPT, or it depends on what kind of AI interface you're using. That some are better than others, but
Yep.
it
Absolutely.
and you really have to. I would caution people when putting their resumes in. I don't put my name, my address, my phone number. I don't put the names of the companies. I'll say, I'll change my resume enough to where it's it has all of my job duties or whatever that I want to put in there, but it'll say major uh, marketing company or
Hmm.
government, local government or whatever. So it doesn't say, oh, so you used to work at the Ann Arbor Housing Commission or whatever.
Right.
Um, so that way, because people are very apprehensive about AI, and so if you want to still use it, just don't use your, like I said, don't put your PII and your personal information in there. But it can be a good tool, but you do have to kind of watch it because it'll make up stuff for you. So if you use it to tailor your resume and stuff, it'll take creative license with you sometimes, and so you want to make sure that once you hand that over to somebody that you can back it up. You don't want it to say that you have, that you're an excellent, that you speak Spanish just because you took a Spanish class.
Right.
Um, so, but it can be a great tool. You just have to, you know, understand its limitations because it does not understand yours.
Yep, absolutely. Again, thank you for sharing. I mean, that is an excellent segue into sort of what I was about to go into, and thank you. You brought up so many good points for that. So, AI is a great tool that you can use, but it's important to know how to use it effectively. And you, I mean, you basically said it, right? So, for one thing, AI is just one tool in your toolkit, right? It's not the entire box. You are not getting AI to necessarily recommend a career for you. You are not getting it to write a resume from scratch for you, or a cover letter, right? It can be, there needs to be some human input. You need to make it sound like you, because if it doesn't, that's gonna, you're gonna get caught at it, right? Um, the experience and skills and things that you put down you have to be able to demonstrate those. Otherwise, you're not going to get very far. So it is a tool. It's not one that you should necessarily rely on exclusively. Um, when you're prompting AI for some of this, especially for career exploration, the more specific prompts, the better. Again, tailor my resume for a career in IT versus tailor my resume for a career as a cybersecurity specialist, right? The more specific, the better sort of output you're going to get. As was mentioned, AI is not perfect. It can make things up. So you always want to double check the information and verify sources. That's why I had for the sample prompt up here about industry trends. You can ask it to cite its sources. Um, and even if you're not sort of asking it to sort of pull information, from the web for you, double check the information. If you want it to tailor your resume, review that pretty carefully to make sure that, again, the information that's on there does reflect you. Always review any sort of AI output very carefully. Um, so so you can catch any mistakes and errors ahead of time. You can also use sort of AI tools to sort of simulate what companies see, right? So AI again is a pretty broad term, but companies have been using applicant tracking systems, or ATS systems, to review resumes and things like that. A lot of times, what will happen, especially for the larger companies, when you submit a job application or a resume, it'll first be read by a computer, right, before moving on to a hiring manager. And that's ATS, right? So that is a form of AI, I would argue. But you can find tools that sort of simulate that. There's a good one that I recommend called JobScan. And basically you can plug a resume in, plug a job description in, and it'll tell you how your resume matches up to that job description, as if sort of an ATS system was reading it. Now, it is, that this is free. There's a free option and a paid option. The free is a little more limited. You only get a certain amount of like scans on a regular basis, but it is a good tool to use. So you can leverage some of these sort of AI powered tools as well. Yeah, and actually you just said, right, comparing a resume to a job posting, absolutely, that's a good way to do it. Even if you're not planning on applying to that specific job, that can be part of your research, right? Here's a typical job posting for an IT help desk specialist. How does my resume measure up, right? That'll give you some information. So comments or questions on using AI as part of this whole process? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it is about the last name. Yes, it was pretty nice. The way you spoke, like how to are looking for a job, like,
Mhm.
for example, volunteering. You know, if you are looking for, um, like, as a volunteer from, an organization,
Mhm.
most likely, um, they will ask, to have like, a resume, a good one.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. So the comment here was,
So,
go ahead. Yeah, sorry, continue.
what happens if, you don't have experience and you are looking for experience?
Yeah. So the question is, certainly for looking for a job or even potentially volunteering, companies will want to see a resume, right? Will want to know about your experience and skills. Now, part of career exploration is you may be switching careers, right? Or entering into a career where you don't really have a lot of experience going in. And so the question is sort of what to do about that. So certainly for volunteering, I would say the sort of a lack of experience isn't necessarily a deal breaker, right? You're there to volunteer, you're there to learn. So I think for the most part, with volunteering, it's not that big of a deal. That said, if some companies do want you to have some knowledge or skills, there are plenty of resources out there. You can do, you can do skill building, right? There are classes and things you can take.
Yeah, at least, you are going to get, even one certification.
Yep, yeah,
If you have, one like, from Coursera.
yeah, exactly. So exactly right. You can do sort of formal certifications, or there's a lot of online resources as well. Things like Coursera, Udemy, Allison.com, where you can actually learn about, a lot of different. I mean, you can learn about pretty much anything. There's a course for any kind of career you can think about that'll at least give you kind of that baseline knowledge and skill set, in order to hopefully get in the door. So doing some skill building on your own is a good way to kind of get around that lack of experience. The other part of it is to identify your transferable skills, and that's a whole nother workshop. But essentially, all of us have skills, and you know a lot of these skills that we have can be used in a few different situations, right? In a few different career fields. I'm going to go back to my example of I work in retail and I want to be a help desk specialist. What's a transferable skill there? Well, both working in retail and working at a help desk involve dealing with people, right? Especially people who might be frustrated or upset about something, right? Certainly, if you ever had a problem with your technology, it can be pretty frustrating, right? So I may not be going in with sort of the technical skills. I may have to learn those somewhere. But the fact that I'm able to deal with people and remain calm and professional, even when it's, when people are being sort of disrespectful or rude or aggressive, that's a skill that people will see, right? And know. Um, in fact, I would argue some of these soft skills, right? Working with people is a lot harder to kind of find than someone who can be trained to do the technical skills. So identifying sort of what skills you currently have that can be applied to your chosen field is part of this whole process.
It's like for, this certificate from Coursera, like, I just about specialist certificate.
You're saying, can you get a certificate from?
Like, if you have a certificate from Coursera, like, as a, support or specialist, is that, valuable?
Yeah. So the question is, if you get a complete a course or get a certificate from an online training like Coursera, is that valuable? I would say yes. I mean, I think in many cases it gives you kind of that baseline knowledge that you need. It may not be the only thing, right? You may need to do some other classes or some other certifications. But
From where?
so it depends. I mean, Montgomery College, for instance, has a lot of like IT certification programs. You can self-study for a lot of these certifications as well. I referenced CompTIA earlier. They have a whole they have a lot of different programs on their website. But I would say, yeah, it's valuable. It definitely gives you sort of a place to start and introduces you to the skills and knowledge that you would need for that field. Yeah, thank you. Let's see. LCS, your hand is up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add in that a lot of times people don't realize that even I'll use the example of people who have been out of work taking care of either parents or children, that a lot of those skills are transferable. If you've managed the budget for a household or for your family reunion or whatever, that's budgeting experience. If you've done transportation for the soccer team, it's transportation experience. You know, if you, a lot of the things that you've done um, are transferable skills, and you may not even think about it, that you know how to do something, but how can you demonstrate to somebody that you know how to do it? And again, that's a good way to use AI. Is like, look, I've been a homemaker, or I've done this, this, and this. What transferable skills would go into this position, or just in general into the job market? Because a lot of times we just don't realize how we can show people what we can do, because we haven't had a paid job doing it.
Yep,
So that's all
exactly.
I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. You know, a lot of, when we talk about experience, I encourage everyone to sort of think about that very broadly. It's not just what you've been paid to do or formally learned in school, but that really does encompass all of your life experience. It could be being a parent or taking care of a family member, or having some sort of role in a community organization, whatever it may be. All of that sort of, yeah, makes up your experience, and you can definitely bring that to the table. And sure, as far as AI goes, you can use that to sort of pull skills from there to and sort of highlight those transferable skills. Yeah, absolutely, you're right. Last point about AI is just, again, the privacy thing. There are many different kinds of AI platforms: ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini, all kinds of things, and each of them are a little bit different, right? So when you're using AI, like any tool, you want to make sure you know how it works, right? Figure out what that particular AI is good for, or maybe not so good for, and make sure you understand their privacy settings. I'm similar to to LC. If I put a resume into ChatGPT, I usually remove all my personal information and things like that in there, just to be safe. So just, make sure you understand sort of how the privacy works and what information they're collecting. Yeah. So that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was helpful. We do have a workshop survey for in person. I've got the QR code up on the screen. Hopefully you can see it on Zoom as well. If you can just take a minute to fill this out, we really appreciate it. It's anonymous, and we use the information to better tailor our offerings going forward. So if everyone can take a minute to fill out the workshop survey, we appreciate it. Also, any last sort of comments or questions on this topic, now is the time.
I have a
So,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
You're with Career Catchers, and I signed up for this meeting, and I saw that you offer coaching assistance, but I think it's only for IT people.
Okay, so thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to talk about that right now. I see the link for the workshop survey is also in the chat, so anyone on Zoom can access it there. So yes, thank you for that question. So as I mentioned, I work for Career Catchers. I'm a career coach, and we are partnered with the Montgomery County Ignite Hub. Now, the Ignite Hub is a program that offers information and resources primarily for individuals who are interested in IT. They have a lot of good sort of information here. They have, various workshops, their fireside chat series, their lunch and learn, where they bring in guest speakers to talk about all sorts of different IT related topics. Our monthly career workshops, like this one, are also, under Ignite Hub, and we'll have another one in December on job search strategies. So it's a really good, resource, and I encourage everyone to check it out. One of the other services here is the career coaching, which you brought up. So for anyone who's a county resident, the Ignite Hub also does provide, so you have to live in Montgomery County, but they're partnered with Career Catchers to provide one-on-one career coaching in addition to these workshops that I facilitate. So you would meet with me, and I can work with you on essentially, the support you need to find a job. So reviewing your resume, identifying appropriate job opportunities, preparing for interviews, finding training, all that kind of support that goes into, finding a job. If you're interested in IT, that's great, but we are not restricted to, we're not restricted to just IT. So if there's other career fields you'd like to explore, that is fine as well. So if you go onto the Ignite Hub website, that's ignitehubmc.com, and all the participants will be getting this information in the email as well. But you can go to career coaching under programs, and you can sign up to make an appointment. Now, the slots online here are a little bit limited. It's only for specific days. So if those are all filled, I'm going to put this is my direct email right here. So if you're interested in setting up a session, just shoot me an email at this address right here, chris@careercatchers.org, and we'll connect, and we can set something up to meet. So yeah, hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yep, and we are pretty flexible. We can meet either virtually or in person, whatever is convenient.
Awesome.
So I will leave that up here as well. Yep, and it's in the chat. So any sort of final comments or questions for today? Thank you all so much to everyone who shared, and again, for everyone for taking time out of your day to join us here.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, thank you so much, and I hope you all have a good rest of your afternoon, and hopefully you can attend our session in December as well. That'll be on job search strategies.
Good question. The
Brilliant.
older ones, I didn't participate in the earlier ones. Are they available to watch?
I believe so.
And if so, is it just on the Ignite Hub webpage? Is that where I would find them? I see Anthony shaking his head to the first question.
Sorry about that. We just have to swap. So yes, it's available on our YouTube page.
YouTube page. Okay.
And you'll get a link to when you get the link for this sort of workshop.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys.
Yep, everyone will get a copy of the recording of this session and the PowerPoint presentation. And also the sort of workshop schedule we have, we will repeat that, in the next year, starting in January, I think. So, I mean, we changed it up a little bit, but we're going to cover a lot of the same material. So if you did miss one, don't worry, we'll do it again, or something very similar.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep, thanks so much. Yeah, so again, thank you all so much for taking time out of your day, and hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.